Good morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Imaginate Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. out on the East Coast, 6 a.m. out on the West Coast. Hope you're hanging in there, washing your hands, social distancing, staying safe. These are crazy times we're living in, and it's having an effect on every aspect of life, whether that is church, family, whether that is business, whether that is recreational, sports. No part of our lives are untouched. And it has been quite the remarkable, interesting, I don't know what all the words you want to use, time that I could ever recall. I have lived through hurricanes. I have seen the aftermath and devastation left behind, and it is it's never a fun moment when a hurricane comes through, and then you have all the cleanup and things that you have to deal with afterwards. But what people don't understand about a hurricane, if you've never been through one, is if you have a hurricane come through your area, it typically leads to an economic boom in the 5 to 10 years after a hurricane hits. There's a bunch of construction booms, business booms, growth. It's an odd part of the aftermath of a hurricane that comes as a result of a storm like that. What we're experiencing worldwide with the coronavirus is on a scale that's just unimaginable in terms of every aspect of life that's being, hit on a personal level, but also on a macro level. Everybody's dealing with this. It is, it's one thing to have a hurricane, say Katrina that hit Mississippi, and then the aftermath of Katrina led to the flooding of the levee system in New Orleans, and you have all of this kind of aftermath and all this stuff going on in that area along the Gulf Coast, and really it was felt in a large swath along the Gulf Coast. But if you were living in California, your life was unaffected. If you were living in Utah, Wyoming, Illinois, New York, your life was generally unaffected. And the supply chains and the resources to get stuff into the hurricane zone, were relatively easy. Things started shipping in, and you had tent cities pop up that people were coming in to work and clean and do and whatever. The problem, what we're seeing here, is the scale of this effect means that there's really not a safe zone at the moment that is fully operational. So, families are dealing with all sorts of economic realities that maybe they weren't, financially prepared for, that they hadn't, been able to create a financial nest egg to weather them through, a layoff. Maybe, they were thinking this was going to last, a couple weeks, and it's lasted longer. And so therefore they've depleted those savings. Whatever the case may be, we're all in this situation together. We're all having to work through, the realities of this, and there's just no way around it at the moment. And it's having an effect on our sports as well. And, mainly in the fact that right now there are no sports. Everything is on lockdown. Everything is shut down. And that is not just professional. That's adult, amateur. That's youth as well. We've talked about on the show that, the NPSL has canceled their season. One of the largest adult amateur leagues in the country has said, look, our short 2-month Cape Cod style summer season that most of our teams play in is not going to take place this summer. So now you've got teams sitting and scrambling, trying to figure out how to navigate the uncertainties of no league to play in. If things resume, what do they do? Where do they go? If they still want to play, what are the options available? There are all sorts of things that youth clubs are having to deal with, and some of these clubs are dealing with them well. Some of them are doing a really terrible job at being a vital part and a service to their players and their families. Some clubs have just said, you know what, we're just done. We're not gonna issue any partial credits or refunds. We're not going to provide or try to provide any resources, any ongoing discussions, training, interactive Zoom sessions. We're closing business. We'll see you in the fall, and thank you for the money. That is, in my view, that's despicable. There are other clubs that are trying to do things. They're trying to send out fun games and resources and reach out to their players and have productive conversations with the families, with the players. They're facilitating, community through, these online, virtual meetups. They're providing remote technical individual training. There are clubs around the country that are trying to do some good stuff by their players. But not all of them, and we should see more of it. And really what we're seeing at the moment is clubs show their true colors. When they're up against the wall, where do they go? What do they do? What are they trying to accomplish during this time? Are they trying to retool and get better? Are they trying to reach their families? Or are they just, we're here for the money. When it's convenient, we're going to take it. When it's not, you're on your own. Best of luck. And now's the time I think families need to take stock of what they're seeing. They need to take stock of the club experience that they're having. Whether that club experience is a club that plays in-house, whether that's, your child is playing in-house in a league, a rec league, community club type of setup, whether that's, paying hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars to play in these really expensive travel clubs. Whatever the case may be, you should take stock of the experience you're having right now. What is the club doing for you? How are they trying to help you in this moment? And that's an observation that we should be having. Every family should be having right now in the youth spaces. What is my club doing? What are they doing for us? And are they trying to be a service to us? Are they trying to help us in this moment? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything the club sends out, and it doesn't mean that if they're sending stuff out and you don't feel like it's the best thing ever, then whatever. But they're making effort, right? If they're showing effort, that's what we should be looking at. Are these clubs showing effort? One of the things that you see in these times right now where there's just uncertainty everywhere. We don't have a timeline. We don't know when this thing ends. We don't know when there's a definitive cure. or that there is a definitive cure at this point. Everyone's working on, in the medical community, ways to treat this, ways to prevent this, ways to cure it, ways to, create vaccines for it. All these things are going on, and we hear, social distancing and timelines of this and that, and we have to adjust based on whatever happens in this space or whatever happens with this. In that reality, living in that world, that uncertainty also affects, these clubs and what they're doing and how they're operating. And so they don't know, right? They can't give us answers if you're in that space. But what they can do is give us effort, right? They may not be able to give us answers, but they can give us effort. Uncertainty is a thing that is crippling to an organization. Uncertainty is crippling to the economy. Uncertainty is crippling to our personal lives. We don't know what we don't know, and sometimes that scares us. We don't know what we don't know, and sometimes that holds us hostage because we can't do anything. We can't move forward. We can't proceed. We can't build. We can't get out and do. We're stuck. It's almost like we're frozen in time, but time is still passing us by, and we can't move with it. Uncertainty is terrible. It's awful. The worrying, the waiting, the unknown, it's crippling. Uncertainty is a disease that has been plaguing U.S. soccer for far longer than the coronavirus. Uncertainty has been permeating the culture of the U.S. Soccer Federation for decades. There's no vision. There's no bold leadership. There are no solutions over the horizon. They're there, but they're not coming. Why? Poor leadership. Leadership that is not handling the sport with all as its best intention, with all as its focus. Uncertainty plagues the youth soccer space. No one knows where things are day to day, long before coronavirus. Why? A lack of leadership, lack of clarity. You have U.S. club soccer and U.S. youth soccer and all of these different functions and programs. You have the U.S. Soccer Development Academy, the Federation in competition with its sanctioned members. Uncertainty everywhere. There's not a clear roadmap or path for a family. Uncertainty in the player development space. What's best for your kid? I don't know. Where do you live? Who's around? Who's the coach? Uncertainty everywhere. You're trying to figure out the best decision for your child. But there are so many unknown factors. Uncertainty everywhere. Is it the right fit? Is it the right club? Do you have the right amount of money? Uncertainty everywhere. Uncertainty is plaguing American soccer in such a fashion that a federation and a nation that should be at the table of the best soccer nations on earth is so far behind of its potential. Our U.S. women's national team win despite the system. They win despite the uncertainty. And they've had to deal with the uncertainty themselves. The uncertainty of whether they ever get treated fairly. The uncertainty of whether their federation actually believes they are of equal value to their male counterparts. Uncertainty is plaguing every aspect of American soccer. If you're an amateur club right now, you have the uncertainty of whether you can exist next season. You have the uncertainty of whether you can play this season. You have the uncertainty that you cannot get away from. Can we do it? Can we sustain? Can we survive? Uncertainty everywhere. There's always choices in life. What do we choose? Where do we go? What club do we want to play for? What school do I want to go to? What job do I want to take? Who do I want to marry? There are choices. There's uncertainty. But you can make those choices. You can find a place of confidence and comfort in your choices. The problem with uncertainty in American soccer is that the structure, the system, the rules, and the people in charge have created a culture of uncertainty that has paralyzed and crippled our potential. It is as if our country has been frozen in time. Time's still moving by. Countries are still developing and investing in the sport. But we're not operating with that level of investment. If you look at the investment in our sport and what you see on the professional level, it's pennies on the dollar compared to the other sports here in America. It's also pennies on the dollar to countries around the world and how they treat the sport of soccer. There's this excuse that basketball, American football, and baseball are just too much for American soccer to handle. I don't buy it for a second. There's more American youth players playing this sport than any other sport in America. Millions of registered players play this sport every year. The problem isn't interest. The problem isn't desire. The problem isn't ambition. The problem isn't economics. We have all the resources we would ever need to be the greatest soccer country on earth. The problem we deal with is uncertainty. Can I build a sustainable club in this culture, in this structure? The answers are inconclusive. More uncertainty. For every outlier that is Detroit City or Chattanooga, there are dozens of clubs that don't make it. Right now, uncertainty is staring a hole into our professional leagues. They are dealing with it in ways that they probably never imagined. Those at the very top of the food chain, Major League Soccer, they dictate the culture and system, the architecture, which everyone else has to deal with. They manipulate and control the system in a way to create certainty for themselves at the expense of everyone else. And even they are now facing uncertainty. Without a television contract worth any money, when you're talking about $90 million shared with the federation and themselves, those are pennies on the dollars of what it could be, should be in America. It's laughable. It's a joke. It's embarrassing. but it's intentional. They've done it to themselves. And they've limited everyone else and created such an environment of uncertainty so that they can have something that they can count on, something they can guarantee themselves. And in the process, they have created a system that relies primarily on match day revenue, parking, real estate, tickets, beer, concessions. They're in the family event business. They need a sellout. Clubs and leagues and countries around the world, their primary source of revenue is media rights, commercial rights, things that can be exponentially more lucrative. And in many cases are much more lucrative than match day revenue. After all, you can only get so much money out of 70,000 people. But if I can get a media deal that can harness 7 million, 70 million, 300 million people, a billion people, it's worth so much more. Uncertainty is plaguing every aspect of American soccer. The professional landscape can't escape it. The amateur space, the youth space. Right now, there's uncertainty facing referees who count on and rely on the revenue of their work. Uncertainty everywhere. State associations, leagues, clubs, all looking at the possibility of a new reality going forward. Will families, A, have the money to deal and pay and invest at the levels they paid in the past going forward for the foreseeable future? Uncertainty. No one knows. And will these families, if they have the money, reprioritize how they spend it? Do they start to trim back and cut back so that they can put more money into a rainy day fund so that this never affects them the way this situation has ever again? Uncertainty everywhere. We can't get around it. We can't escape it. We can't run away from it. Uncertainty is in our face, and it is an inescapable reality. The coronavirus has done some major work on the life of people all over the world. It's affecting us everywhere. But in the uncertainty of American soccer life, that's been created by the United States Soccer Federation. That is a problem. In the absence of leadership, we have uncertainty. We have a toxic culture. We have a group of individuals who keep it in the family. Why? For personal gain. That gain may be power, it may be access, it may be money. It may be a sense of feeling like I'm important. Status. But that has all happened at the expense of 99.999% of American soccer. We have uncertainty everywhere. Youth clubs are facing it. Pro clubs are facing it. The Federation is facing it. In much of the uncertainty that has existed within American soccer outside of the coronavirus is U.S. soccer's abdication of leadership. Bold vision, that unites, connects everyone should be the goal. How anyone within U.S. soccer can argue that we should have classes of people and organizations in this country, that some people should matter more than others when it comes to opportunity and access, is despicable. Plain and simple. We should be a country that is serious about growing the game and uniting and connecting every single person in this country together. Go start a club. Build it as big as you can build it. You may never reach professional soccer. You may never reach the top of professional soccer. But you had the opportunity. That's all anyone should be asking for. And that's what the Federation should be leading the charge for. A vision that connects, harnesses, unites, leverages all of the American soccer potential. We'll never get there in the way that we're operating now, where we proactively breed uncertainty. We do this, and we've seen this done within American soccer for power and access, control, money. We are a ginormous country, a world power in so many areas and in so many ways. But we are intentionally not in American soccer because those who have been in charge of the Federation for decades don't want that to happen. If they did, they would make different decisions. Instead, we are left with the aftermath of the hurricane that is poor leadership within the Federation. And that is primarily uncertainty. You can start a league, you can build a club, but there are so many unknowns, so many uncertainties that it limits what you can do. Too many investors look at the American soccer landscape and don't want to engage. Why? Because they are unsure that they could ever make it go, make it work. If there's one thing that we can change, one thing that we can do going forward, it's to create a vision and a plan and a roadmap that unites everyone and removes as much uncertainty as possible from the American soccer landscape. Our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. And if you haven't gone to check them out, you should check them out today. They make these really cool journals, and they've got like the soccer lines on it, and they've got these notes. I mean, like it's really, really good, useful resources. Right now, maybe your kids are watching a lot of matches, and this is a way that they could actually chart some runs or make some notes. Maybe their club's sending them some information. This is a great, great gift. Maybe you're a parent and you just want to say thank you to your coach who is actually trying to help you. Send them a Ductic journal. Say thanks, coach. Go to ducticbrand.com today. Use promo code DWShow. You'll get 10% off of your order at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back after this. back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Coming up right now, we are going to bring you an interview that we did. It was a Zoom interview we did with Paul Tenorio of The Athletic on Friday, and I want to share that with you today. And appreciate Paul taking some time to chat with us and kind of discuss some of the things that he's seeing, and we get into a little bit of Major League Soccer and the scheduling and the uncertainty around the schedule and all soccer at this point of what is the reality going forward, and look at one of the things that I'm passionate about, which is getting American soccer on the right calendar. Youth soccer is already on it. Everyone that sits here and says, well, we can never do this with professional soccer. Well, we're already doing it in the youth space. We're running August, and we're ended up in July, June, whatever. And we could do this on the professional landscape. It's just a matter of the fact that Major League Soccer hasn't wanted to, and that's the bottom line. So we talk about this, and we talk about a little bit of that reality of what is at stake, what should be taking place, in terms of these conversations right now with the uncertainty, when they can get back, what is that, and what is the opportunity to make some changes. So I appreciate Paul taking the time to do that and to spend some time with us to talk a little bit about that as well. So this is a conversation, an interview that we did with Paul Tenorio. We recorded this past Friday for today's show. I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back after this interview to wrap up today's show. Thanks to Paul for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Paul.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you, my man?
I've got kind of a janky setup here. I'm trying to stay somewhere where we won't hear the baby freak out when she gets put down for a nap. So I'm in my room in a back hall. So
it's okay, my man. How you been?
Hanging in, man. Hanging in. How about you?
Yeah, same here. Juggling a million different things at the same time. So
yeah,
just really a lot of watching, waiting, for any kind of definitive timelines, or just everything's kind of up in limbo. So just
I think it's going to be a while before we get one of those, but we'll see.
I agree. I talked to a parent of one of the team that I coach. He's an ER doc, and he was basically like, here's kind of what we're hearing at the hospital, and certainly didn't sound like we're going to be back to work and running around as normal in 2 weeks. I'll put it that way.
No, I don't think so.
So anyway, well, good deal. Well, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll air this on Monday.
Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of, I guess, pick your brain on a couple things. I was going through some of the Q&A you and Meg did the other day, and wanted to kind of follow up with a couple questions and just kind of get your thoughts on what you're seeing and hearing from the American soccer landscape, especially right now with all the stories that you guys have been covering, but also just all of the COVID-19 effects as well, right? So there's a lot of things going on, and I want to start there. So with the coronavirus situation, what are you hearing in terms of the leagues? I know we saw an announcement with the NPSL saying, hey, we're just going to cancel the season. What are you hearing from some other leagues, maybe some of the pro leagues, in terms of either preparations for abbreviated or reformatted season or canceled season? What are you hearing along those lines?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what the leagues are kind of thinking right now. When you look at MLS, they are, and USL for that matter, they are so dependent on game day revenue that it becomes very difficult for them to start a season without fans in the stands, right? They would take almost a bigger financial hit to do that than they would to wait as long as possible. So I think that's what you're going to see from Major League Soccer. We might see the NBA or the NHL, Major League Baseball, come back early without fans in the stadium and play these games in order to fulfill their TV contracts and start to make some money back and get the games underway. With MLS, I think they're going to wait to the last possible minute before they start to play games. And that's where things get a little bit kind of up in the air because we don't know when it's going to be safe to put 20,000, 25,000 in Atlanta, 45,000, 60,000 people in a stadium. I mean, that's essentially a biological time bomb potentially. So there are a lot of questions that MLS is going to have to answer. So as part of that, there are different scenarios for that league. One, if they come back later in the year, they could potentially have, depending on when they come back, they want to play all 34 games and have a playoff. They need all that revenue. They need to try to make that money back. Once you hit a certain point, say August, September, that's not possible. So then you'd be looking at a condensed schedule. And there are all these different scenarios of what would that schedule look like? How many games would it be? You know, could they create something that would be attractive for TV partners? USL, it's the same idea. They're taking an even bigger hit financially. I mean, you know, MLS, we talk about this league like it's, you know, a third world league or something just because it's not equal to the European leagues in quality on the field. These owners in MLS are billionaires, okay? So they're going to be okay. You know, USL is much more equivalent to the leagues we're seeing around the world where this financial impact is going to hit them hard.
Right.
And that's the big concern I think we should have as an American public. What does this do to the USL clubs? What does this do to the MPSL clubs? What does this do to the NWSL clubs? Obviously, they have the backing of US Soccer to keep that thing afloat, but you want to maintain the momentum of the World Cup, and now the Olympics are gone. So those smaller leagues, I think, are where I think the bigger concern comes in because we're going to probably see some clubs fold or take a hiatus because they can't absorb this hit. Now, part of the structure of USL might make that a little bit easier. You know, the contracts that they have where they're not going to have to pay rental fees to the stadiums that they don't own. You know, they're not going to have to pay those operations. The contracts have changed. They're fewer month-to-month contracts, so they do have obligations there. But I do think for me, MLS is going to be okay no matter when they come back because of the financial strength of their ownership group. I have bigger questions about what does USL look like going forward? Do we see some teams, you know, take a hiatus? Do we see some teams go under? And that's the sad part because whenever that happens, that's jobs for American soccer players off the table, and that's not a good thing for American soccer.
Yeah, I agree. And when I look at Major League Soccer, this is you know, a situation where it's not MLS specific. There's only one league that's talked about going fall to spring, and they're technically not like fully set up running fall to spring, and that's NISA. But most leagues are running spring to fall, which drives me crazy. I think when I look at Major League Soccer, to me, I look at it as an opportunity. It looks like this thing's going to drag out. They need to get the match day revenue in from all the matches, as you mentioned. They part of their discussions right now. I saw something the other day where they were looking at going deep into December to try to pull that off. You know, at some point, I would hope that there are some owners in that room that go, why don't we just get on the same calendar as the rest of, you know, the Northern Hemisphere and run some version of a fall to spring with a winter break type setup and get our season in. Let's just, you know, take it as like Mother Nature's guiding us in this direction rather than, you know, running it like a strike shortened season that we've seen in the past with the NBA or Major League Baseball, where, you know, you've had a severe reduction in games and then they came back later in the season and tried to get something done. You know, I would like to hope at least that conversation is being had, you know, as part of whatever conversation they're having in terms of logistics and, you know, putting stuff off or trying to figure out, okay, if we started in August, what could we get done? because to me that's 34 matches and playoffs and including a winter break to account for it is really not complicated to pull off from a scheduling standpoint if you're running fall to spring. So
Yeah. I think the interesting angle to that would be, and I don't disagree that that's a conversation that needs to be had at least, right? I mean, logistically, it makes a lot of sense, especially, um, especially in the context of the growth of the league. And I think, I did a podcast last night with Sam Stejskal. It's not out yet, but we talked about the business implications for MLS in this moment. When the global soccer market kicks off again, Major League Soccer is going to have an opportunity, and no one. It comes off as crass talking about it, frankly, to capitalize on what is a really negative global situation. But the one interesting angle to flipping the calendar that I think is going to be a part of those discussions, if they have them, is how does it affect the contracts that exist? Specifically, most importantly, the media contract, the TV contract that's coming up in 2022. So if you change the season format right now, when does that contract come up? Do you extend it 6 months? Or, obviously MLS wants that next contract to be this, the magic bean, right? The giant comes down the stock and is just carrying bags of money. And so they need that contract to be renegotiated. And can they make themselves more attractive by doing that, by flipping the calendar, by getting in line with the transfer markets for the bigger European leagues, where maybe now it becomes more natural to sign players before your season versus the middle of your season. But I think those are the angles that would be most interesting is, does that extend those negotiations another 6 months? Would the the ESPNs and the Fox be willing to accept a change in schedule that would put MLS up against their other properties, NFL, college football? Those are probably the bigger impediments versus MLS just saying we want to do it, because I think we've had, Sam was telling me just yesterday, he had a conversation with somebody in MLS who was saying, hey, why not, if you've been talking about this merger with Liga MX all the time, why not do it right now? Do a clausura in the fall with the Liga MX teams and combine the leagues and make something different and attractive. I don't know. I mean, but clearly all of these ideas are being talked about, and it's a matter of making it attractive enough for your partners to say, yes, we're on board, we'll adjust the contracts, and we'll move forward.
Well, I know when Eric Winalda was running for president in 2018, and I was running in his campaign and on his team, he was talking a lot to the members, the voters of the federation, about this idea of getting all of our professional soccer on a fall to spring calendar. And he had some conversations, off the record with different media people. Some of the names and 4 and 3 letter words that you mentioned about this idea of fall to spring and what could come of it, and they actually were in favor of it at that time in 2018 because you're already running up against college football and the NFL in the fall right now with Major League Soccer and the USL running into October, November, and that's when the signature kind of finals are, playoffs are, and that's like right in the thick of the NFL college football season, which is their ratings bonanza. It's actually the networks were actually excited about the idea of having American soccer be big in April and May when you have only really the NBA wrapping up its season, starting with playoffs and I guess April, May, somewhere in there running into June. And so, baseball's getting kicked off, but that's not this ratings bonanza in April and May. So they actually thought it would be great to kind of clear the decks of those conflicts and have that kind of signature final and an opportunity to kind of really celebrate that. And the other thing that intrigued them, and this was another conversation Eric was having with a lot of people at the time, was right now the International Champions Cup, which are, basically just glorified friendlies in the summer that Relevant Sports puts on, and they bring over the likes of, Barcelona and Madrid and Liverpool and others to play these matches. Having Major League Soccer in the USL and all these professional teams essentially in their kind of preseason lined up with those teams actually provides even more catalog of potential blockbuster matches that people would want to see, where right now MLS tries to work some of those in while continuing their season. If they were, in July, in early part of August, all these MLS teams are hosting the likes of Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund and PSG and others. They felt like it'd be a ratings bonanza to have those teams face off against each other, face off against MLS teams, etc. So I think that business-wise, TV-wise, I think from what I've heard behind the scenes, they're intrigued by it, not dissuaded or apprehensive of that idea.
And I think the interesting side of it is I think we've seen MLS in the same way kind of quietly experiment with that idea of not being up against the marquee moments that you're talking about of NFL and college football. And they did it in what I thought was the worst possible way, which is moving MLS Cup from December, when they stuck it on a weekend when the only college football event happening was the Army-Navy game. They moved it back into November to try to avoid having its playoffs matched up against those bigger NFL games, those bigger college football games, and into October instead, right? And Pablo Maurer and I got a hold of the BCG report that MLS commissioned a few years back. And in that report, they talk about that same idea that you're saying. These are some moments where MLS is matched up against some of the marquee events for the NFL and for college football, and in other areas too, where when you're starting your season, you're up against, these kind of NBA playoffs and things like that. How can you change that? And I think that those ideas in the BCG study actually, to me, were not great ideas. They talked about having mini tournaments in the winter and things like that with Liga MX teams. I think we'll see that integrated a little bit. But I don't think it's insignificant that in that study, something that MLS has used as a pretty, I don't want to say stringent guide, but as certainly something to guide their policy over the last few years, that even in that study that they commissioned, it says, hey, there are some aspects of this calendar that work against you building a TV audience. And so, again, I know that there were conversations that the league had back in 2013, 2014 about changing the calendar. And publicly, they said that those weren't really serious conversations. Privately, they were. And I think that at some point, those conversations are going to start up again because of that TV contract, because of that negotiation in 2022. What can they do to make that product as attractive as possible to their TV partners to put the money on the table? And as with every business and with every professional sports league, the thing that drives the decision making is going to be the money and the revenue. And the one area that MLS lacks compared to any other league in the rest of the world, soccer or professional sports in the US, is the TV revenue. Right now, their number one stream of revenue is game day, and that's not a good thing for growth. So I would not be surprised if those conversations are happening. And you're right. Maybe this is forcing a conversation sooner than MLS wanted it, but maybe it does give them a natural point to say, okay, the best way we can salvage the revenue that we're losing right now is to flip the calendar. I would imagine right now in this unprecedented time that you have to have the conversation, that everything has to be on the table.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. To me, that's just part of doing your due diligence. I think every card has to be on the table. And obviously, your worst case scenario, if you're a professional league, is the C word, cancel. You don't want that conversation. You certainly don't want to go there. And so you work back from that. Obviously, what's our best case scenario? Well, would be to play tomorrow. Well, we know that's not happening. So then, what can we do? And when you're working through, solutions, I just think that's got to be one conversation that's got to be included in all of the different conversations about, shortened season, augmented season, etc. I'm not a fan of the cross-border league idea. I don't even like Canadian teams in Major League Soccer. No offense to our brethren to the north or the south. We're a continent-sized country. We've got enough markets that could easily fill first division, 2, 3, 4 times over. When you look at the metro market size compared to the countries around the world that operate these, massive first division leagues. And so I really just want to see our American league grow and get better. And one of the big things that you mentioned about the TV revenue thing is you've got to have eyeballs. You've got to have viewers, and those numbers are not really drastically trending in the right direction for a big payday. The last TV deal had to be bundled with the federation's national teams just to get one done. And so I know Garber's going to want to keep that bundle because that helps him do what he wants to do with Major League Soccer in terms of, inflating that number and trying to grow it as big as he can. But I think it kind of gets to that old axiom of, if you do what you've always done, expecting different results, that's insanity. In this case, I think they've got to look at some things and go, okay, hey, if we're serious about growing TV revenue and making some really big progress in that area, then we've got to do a rethink of what that would mean for us. And that might be scheduling. It might be, like I said, the ability to have those other side effects of the fall to spring schedule, like having Bayern Munich coming to play, against Atlanta United in Atlanta as part of a package now that can be, put together. So I think that's a big thing that's got to be part of the conversation. And I'm hopeful that, that there's enough Major League Soccer owner operators that see why that soccer decision actually makes better business sense than status quo and kind of beating our head against a wall.
Yeah, I think there's the way I always refer to it is it's a chicken or an egg situation for MLS, right? They want the TV money to go through the roof, but in order to see that money go up, then the product has to change and it needs to get better, right? It needs to become more competitive and more compelling to watch. Those numbers need to go up. You need to make people want to tune in. So what comes first, right? If you want the money, if you want the audience, you have to change the product on the field to make the people tune in. But on the flip side, they're saying, well, we need the revenue in order to put more onto the field that would make those people tune in. So which one comes first? And I think, and again, I'm going to plug my podcast, I guess, with Sam last night, Allocation Disorder. But we talked about this moment, I believe, is this inflection point that's been thrust upon MLS. And the way Sam put it, I thought was really smart, which is all of these businesses, whether you're soccer or whether you're the athletic or an investment company or whatever it may be, there are moments where you have to take advantage of an opportunity, and you have to recognize that opportunity and bet on it and get it right. And I think when these markets open back up, we're going to see it flooded with selling teams because there are teams around the world who are going to be in financial distress. And the fastest way in global football to inject money into your club is to sell players, right? It's a great source of revenue for pretty much every league in the world except for MLS, which is finally learning they have to sell players. Imagine that. So as this happens, we also know that because every owner, even the billionaire owners in MLS, are going to be taking this, the economy is what it is globally, right? We're talking about a depression or a recession potentially happening. Everyone's going to take a financial hit. That means the prices on the market are going to drop as well. And there's going to be an opportunity for MLS to say, we have the financial standing of our owners to go out and be aggressive and to buy players and to change what this league looks like. And in order to do that, they're going to have to change the rules, right? They're going to have to add some more DP spots. They're going to have to inject money into the cap and say, let's take advantage of it. We have a chance to leap and catch. I don't want to say catch the other European leagues, but certainly catch up. And they haven't been catching up in the last 5 years. Even as they've added money, everyone else has added more. And I think MLS is falling behind. Here's an opportunity that you can inject the money, jump up way higher in quality and make yourself more attractive for your TV partners. The flip side of that is if, and this is an if, MLS comes back to play some kind of shortened season this fall, it's going to put a lot of stress on those players and on those rosters. You're going to have to use players 1 through 30. And this is another major point that I think could be transformative for American soccer is all of a sudden teams that were reticent to put young players on the field are going to be forced to do so. And maybe, just maybe, we're going to see some players surprise us and do well. And when that happens, those teams and those coaches are going to be convinced, hey, maybe I just need to give this kid a shot, this 16-year-old or their 17-year-old, and give him some minutes and he'll surprise me. He'll do more than what I saw in training, or he'll respond better than I think he could. And even if that just happens in 4 teams or 5 teams, and you add those 4 or 5 teams to clubs like Dallas or Red Bulls or Philadelphia, who are built around the homegrown model, all of a sudden now you have a league with 8, 9, 10 teams that are willing to put young American players on the field. And we'll see the American player, I think, grow out of that. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. Those are 2 areas that are there, right? Are there for the change to be taken advantage of by MLS and its owners. If those 2 things happen, if MLS changes its rules kind of midstream here and allows owners to go out and buy players aggressively in a market that I think will be primed for it to do so, I think we'll see some growth, right? And I think we'll see the product get better and maybe more eyeballs. And now we can start talking about what can we do to make it more attractive for TV partners. If those young players take advantage of opportunities, now we can start talking about how can MLS be a little bit more like the Bundesliga, trusting teenagers on the field. And all of a sudden you have a league that's, I don't want to say markedly different, but certainly significantly better. And I think that kind of gets me excited about what we could see happen at the end of COVID. And maybe I'm just excited about it because I'm talking about the light at the end of the tunnel that I don't see right now. But I do feel like we're talking about things getting forced onto MLS, these decisions that are getting forced onto you because of the circumstances. And in addition to the potential change of schedule, those are 2 massive ideas and massive decisions that could be there to seize, and in my mind could be just as important as that new TV deal, just as important as the 2026 World Cup in altering the landscape of the top division in American soccer, which we know will have a trickle-down effect on the lower divisions as well.
I agree. I think, the one of the problems I think that Don Garber has had in his leadership is, and just looking at like how decisions are made and kind of what has been the focus, it's been a little bit too harsh or focused on a black or white. I'm either or. I'm, like I want TV revenue and like I want that, but then an unwillingness or inability to adapt to how do you actually achieve that? Like you can go out and talk about it, but some of the things you talked about are all part of what changes the landscape to make that a possibility. So the investments, on the field, the investments in terms of, being able to have this stockpile of games that you're not going to get right now, or at least as much of them with the current kind of spring to fall calendar. I just think there's a lot of things that connect that, if they really put it all on the table and said, how do we reach our goals? How do we really make stark improvement, as you talked about, take advantage of a disadvantage, and try to come out on the other side of this thing better? I think all of those things have to be put on the table to say, here's what we can do. Here's, I know that financially that they have built in, limitations to restrict the risks. And so loosening some of those, are going to be necessary to achieve some of those things, but they could, I would prefer them to kind of just go, hey, we're all in on the world's game, playing it the world's way. But if they could at least take some steps in that direction, would be better than nothing, you know?
Well, that's the battle right there. That idea of risk mitigation. That's what MLS has kind of been built on. And to the league's credit, I mean, here it is, 25 years later, right? It still exists. It exists in a strong form. Just yesterday, we were on a call with Eric Winalda and Jeff Agus and Bruce Arena, and Eric and Bruce both said something about the fact that they would never have believed that the league would be here in its current form 25 years later. And we have to acknowledge that the way that the league kind of moved forward in 2001, 2002 with that meeting to save the league, they did all these things to try to give it financial stability, and they maintained this conservative growth model, right? That's been the most important thing. But at a certain point, again, I'm gonna harp on it. Like, at a certain point, businesses have to take risks, and it's okay to grow conservatively when that conservative mindset is allowing you to grow, right? Is allowing you to keep pace or keep the right pace to have the level of growth that you're looking to achieve. But MLS has a chance to accelerate that growth, and in order to do that, it needs to pull back some of these conservative measures. And it's not just Don Garber, right? I mean, we have to remember Don Garber works for the owners of Major League Soccer. He's an employee.
Right.
And there is a faction of ownership group that remain very conservative in how they want this league to grow. And maybe for all the negatives that we can talk about with expansion, the positive has been it's brought in a lot of owners who all of a sudden have put $500 million down on the table, and they're saying, what do you mean conservative growth? I got $500 million of investment in this thing. Let's push it. And that kind of battle that exists between, I don't even want to call it the new guard, because there are some owners who have been around a long time that are ready to move the growth, but the more aggressive thinking ownership groups finally are starting to have enough weight to push back against those conservative owners. That being said, those conservative owners still have significant sway in this league. They are the chair people of some of the most important committees within the board of governors. And until those owners are swayed, until they're turned over to the other side, until they acknowledge that conservative growth is not going to be enough to see the return on investment that everyone wants, the league's not going to change. And what is going to turn that over? I don't know. Maybe it's something as, I don't want to say small as, but maybe it's something as insignificant in the grand picture of Boston getting a downtown soccer stadium, and suddenly the Crafts are on the other side of the argument, and that's a huge pendulum swing, right? Now all of a sudden the momentum's over here. Maybe it's something like COVID, where the evidence put in front of them is of, hey, here's an opportunity that's not going to happen again. We can either miss it or we can hit it, right? Maybe it's that. But until that conservative faction starts to have some defectors, I don't think we're going to see much change. But if you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago, do I see that happening in the next 10 years? I would have said no. Right now, do I see it happening in the next 5 or 10 years? Yes, I do. I do think there's the momentum where, the Arthur Blanks of the world are getting a little bit more power and a little bit more of a strength of ownership behind them. And I think it's possible, certainly before the 2026 World Cup. But, this is going to be, it's going to be down to that idea of, yes, you've built this kind of risk averse league and it's done really well considering, and it's scary to just dive in. But at a certain point, man, what are we in this for, right? What are we in this for? Because the potential of the league, the potential of the sport in this country is massive. I mean, massive. And when you talk to people who are outside of this country, who are coming in from the outside and looking at it. I remember sitting down with Bastian Schweinsteiger here in Chicago, and we are having this debate about how MLS can best grow, and he's pounding the table, talking about, like, they got to get rid of the cap, and don't let the best American players leave. Just keep the best American players here and get rid of the cap. And star players are going to want to come to play in the United States. It was so obvious to him that the cap was the biggest thing holding back MLS. Everyone knows where this league can go. I'm not saying you have to eliminate the cap to be successful, but you certainly can't maintain the current growth level and become one of the best leagues in the world by 2026, as MLS leadership has said.
Yeah, and to that point, that's why I say this constantly on the show. Don't listen to what people say; watch what they do. And it's easy to get up and say we're going to be the best league by 2022 or 2026 or 2050. It doesn't matter. What are you doing? And to your point, this is a great opportunity to do some things to improve the league. Want to shift gears here for just a second on the federation. What are you hearing? I mean, obviously, all the news surrounding the legal trouble with U.S. soccer is with the U.S. women's national team, but there are multiple lawsuits, as we both know, facing the federation. What are you hearing on all of those fronts in terms of settlement or progress? And how has COVID kind of impacted the legal cases that are facing the federation?
Well, I think there's certainly been an impact from COVID because the courts are closed, and so that's going to delay some of the trials from potentially starting. Some of those dates are going to get pushed back, and as a result, maybe there won't be the timeline that we expected before for resolution. I can say I think that the top priority within U.S. soccer right now is that lawsuit with the women's national team, and I believe that there will be a settlement at some point. Now, the question is going to be how much money, right? And right now they're pretty far apart because of that FIFA prize money that kind of sits at the middle of this conversation. Should U.S. soccer be responsible for matching what the men's teams are awarded for winning a World Cup? I don't know where that number is going to land, but I do think that conversations about settlements are going to accelerate. And we've already seen the legal movement toward that, right? We saw the change in representation to Latham and Watkins, and we saw the filings that they did where they're pulling out those arguments. And not only are they pulling them out, which you can do quietly, they did so quite loudly, right, in the filings to let everyone know and let the articles be written that this is no longer a part of our legal strategy. I believe that the focus will turn toward trying to find a settlement. We've heard from the Women's National Team Players Association, and their response was very short, which is just there's one way to settle this, and it's equal pay. So it's one thing to kind of what you just said. It's one thing to say you want to settle. It's another thing to do it, right? What's it going to take to actually do it? And I think I don't know when we'll have that resolution because of this ongoing situation, right? I mean, the world is in kind of a crisis right now, and it's I think one interesting angle to this, and I don't know why it's this way. I think it's this way in kind of like all types of business. Sometimes is getting face to face and sitting down across the table. Sometimes helps a deal happen faster than it does over the phone, and those meetings aren't happening right now. They're not going to take place. Can they get it done over the phone? Maybe. Maybe they're going to be having Zoom meetings to settle. But I do think there's an impact. As for the other,
Well, hopefully we get to
cases,
watch those, right? If they're going to
yeah,
Zoom
right.
them, send us all an
Someone's
invite
got
so
to
we can just
screen
watch,
record.
pop some popcorn, and just sit back and relax.
Yeah, somebody's going to controversially have a screen record on and send it out to. I would have said Deadspin if it was still around. Maybe they can send it to the Athletic.
The Athletic, TMZ. I mean, there. I think there's a host of places that would be
Sure,
happy to share that content.
sure. Yeah, so I mean, I do think that we'll start to see these cases, like the relevant case as an example. That's so far down the line at this point, and there's been so much money spent. I think we were told at least that the vast majority of that $9 million in legal fees, um, a good chunk of it was for that relevant case because U.S. Soccer has insurance policies that cover some of these legal fees up to a certain amount, and the insurance policy for that relevant filing was maximized. So that money is coming out of the pockets of U.S. Soccer now, the ledger of U.S. Soccer directly, which is why that made up the majority. It's not that that case is more costly necessarily. It's just that that insurance policy is up, so or maximized. So I would imagine that there will be conversations across the board now that new leadership is there to see if there's resolution. But I think we'll see most of those cases play out in the courts once those dockets get back to kind of their regular schedule. Um, I think the one exception off the bat is going to be the U.S. women, and it does matter also. I think as part of a legal strategy to prioritize settlement versus prioritizing a lawsuit, and just that change in mentality. Set aside what the arguments are in the lawsuit. The legal strategy to turn from we're going to win this in court and we believe we can win this in court to we're going to try to settle, I think is not something that should be just brushed aside. That's a significant decision, and hopefully, for the sake of the sport in this country, it's one that that leads to some kind of positive development in what has been, I think, an embarrassment for U.S. soccer on multiple levels, as we've seen. Now, you know, the hard part is coming to an agreement,
Right.
right? Coming to that settlement.
Yeah, and I second your opinion there on the embarrassment. There's a lot of decisions and actions that I think are embarrassing for a national governing body, and I think it's why we've seen so many legal challenges to the federation, because people just said enough is enough from different aspects, and I think, hopefully on the U.S. women's national team case, we get to a place where both teams are treated equally, and I know that was a big issue for Eric when he was running, and the women he had spoken to on the athlete council about that was it goes beyond. People use the word equal pay, and I think the U.S. women's national team have even used that term equal pay, and I know it's kind of a buzzword, but it actually goes beyond that. It's equal treatment, and that's a whole nother level. And Hope Solo has talked about it publicly about the treatment of training, travel, and other things, where it goes beyond just the financial monetary piece. It's also just how are we held in esteem versus how the men are held in esteem, in kind of what you mentioned. Do we settle? Do we fight? It's also how do we view the women's national team versus the men's national team. So there's I think a lot of culture changes within the federation that need to happen in order to get the settlement where it needs to be. I'm glad that they're saying and indicating that they want to reach a settlement, but the actions of what that settlement looks like and where they enter those negotiations and conversations from, whatever that kind of frame of reference and point of view is also, I think, going to be telling to see whether or not we've seen a cultural shift under Cindy Parlow-Cone as president, and Will Wilson as the new CEO, or is it kind of lipstick on a pig? Like we're kind of going in that direction, but we're not actually fully, embracing that. So, again, words really don't mean anything. Let's see what they do. And the women keep doing their job. They keep winning and performing and excelling. And I think we need to treat them like the champions that they are. So, Paul, thanks for coming on the show. Stay safe with all the COVID-19 stuff, and you and your family. How can people follow your work, connect with you and the Athletic, and you mentioned the podcast that you do with Sam. How can they listen to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, and same to you and to everyone that are watching and listening. Stay safe, stay inside, wash your hands, don't touch your face. All those things that we've heard over and over again. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul Tenorio. Obviously, theathletic.com. We have a great deal right now in the middle of all this. It's 3 months of a free trial. So you can get 3 months of The Athletic, and the day before that 3 months is up, cancel, and you don't ever pay a dime. Or you can pay the $5 a month after that, which I think is a pretty good deal for sports fans. And allocation disorder is through the Athletic app, but it's also through Total Soccer Show, which means that right now it's outside of the paywall. You can listen to Allocation Disorder through the Total Soccer Show feed on any of your podcasting channels, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is you might use. We're within the Total Soccer Show feed. You just got to look for the ones that are labeled Allocation Disorder. The episode we recorded last night should hopefully be out at some point. You guys are buying right now. If you go look for it now, you should be able to find it. And that's the way to find my work. And hopefully you'll see some reporting from me in the next few months that indicates that some of the changes we talked about, the potential changes, the opportunities that are there, are being grasped by the different parties that we've discussed today.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope any progress for me is good, right? Even if it's small steps. I want to see big changes and sweeping changes, but we get there one step at a time. So any progress we can get, I'll take it, right? So anyway, well, thanks, Paul. Stay safe. We'll talk soon, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much.
All right, my man. See ya.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Big thanks to Paul for jumping on the show. Thanks for watching today. We went a little bit longer than we normally do on a Monday, but appreciate Paul spending time with us and wanted to bring you that full interview today. Thanks for watching. As always, we appreciate it. We look forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Social distance. Hopefully we'll get through this sooner rather than later. Goodbye.